Diversity is one of the few constants in universal truths. There are differences between people and groups and places, but what does diversity mean exactly, and how are we going to be defining it here? In this discussion about children's media, we're thinking about the diversity of human experiences and identity, specifically related to race and ethnicity and culture, but also things like language and gender presentation and social class status, family structures, the diverse ways that humans live and grow. And more importantly, our focus is on diversity in terms of paying attention to who's included and who's represented and who's not, and why that matters. I'm very excited to welcome everyone to our panel today, Inclusivity Now, Why Families Want and Need Diverse Media. I'm Dr. Ani Rogers, professor of psychology and scholar of child and adolescent development at Northwestern University, and I'm very delighted to serve as your moderator for our conversation today.
And I'm Adam Woodgate. I'm at Dubbit. We're a UK-based kids digital and research agency. We specialise in kids and only kids.
I'm Jill Murphy. I'm the editor-in-chief and head of distribution at Common Sense Media. We are one of the largest children's advocacy organizations. My focus is primarily on our ratings platform. So we cover ratings and reviews for kids content. So parents have an independent rating and help families make decisions.
And I'm a developmental psychologist, as I mentioned, and most of my research focuses on how children and young people think about who they are and how they understand social groups and social identities. And so today I'm going to be asking our panelists some exciting questions related to this topic of diversity. Adam, can we start with you? One of your key findings was that children want their television channels and services to be inclusive. Can you tell us more about what this means?
Yes. So in our global survey of kids' media and tech use, Dubbit Trends, in the autumn of last year, we surveyed 8 countries. And it was interesting to see that with the exception of France, the majority of 2 to 17-year-olds really do want their TV series and shows that they watch, whether that's on linear TV, whether it's on streaming services, and even the videos they watch on YouTube, to have a diversity of characters, people from different backgrounds and ethnic groups, and show a greater representation. Now, France is the outlier, and depending on age, somewhere between 33 and 45% want more diversity in the characters they see on their TV. But generally around the world, kids really, really do want to see a reflection of, what they see in their school, what they see in their neighborhood, who they see in their towns and cities. They really do want to see, a good cross-section of people, not just what they're seeing right now. And depending on the country, I think somewhere between 30 and 47% of kids tell us that the shows that they're watching right now don't have enough characters from different backgrounds, showing kids with disability or different skin color. They really don't see enough of that, yet in the real world they do. So they see this disconnect between what they're seeing on their TV versus what they're seeing in the real world. And because of this, between 38 and 57%, depending on the country, that's almost 20 percentage points difference, say the characters in the TV shows they watch just don't seem like the boys or the men, the girls or the women that they come across in real life.
Thank you for that, Adam. And I think those findings are so powerful and really reflect what we know about children's development. So particularly during childhood and into adolescence, kids are deeply interested in themselves, right? They're interested in who they are and who they're becoming. They're thinking about these questions: who am I? Who am I going to become? And they're looking to peers, of course, but also family and the media, which plays a major role in their everyday lives. Children spend a lot of time on media. They're not just sort of passive consumers of that media, but they are engaging in these questions of where am I in this story? How does this connect to what I know? So those are really important findings. Thanks for sharing, Adam. Jill, can you tell us a little bit more about what Common Sense Media audiences have been asking with regard to diversity?
I think we're aligned on this need. So it sounds clear from Adam. It's coming from the kids. It's certainly coming from the parents too, looking for more diversity in the content that kids are being exposed to. In our study, we're finding that larger and larger percentages of parents want media with characters from their own ethnicity and race to have it be much more representative. 75% of Black families, 65% of multiracial families. It cuts across the board. And I think media ends up being the great leveler, that we're all either looking for representation of ourselves and to share experiences or perspectives to our own families, as well as that feeling of being represented and having it shared to others. And then also looking to expose and share with our own kids and families what they may not have in their own community, and really having an exposure and experience, and at least, different than lived experience, but still being able to see and some representation from other backgrounds, other cultures, and diversity in every sense of the word, and really being able to share that with our kids. So that's certainly coming across in the research. There's no doubt 6 in 10 parents say that media has prompted conversations about diversity. So we know that parents are not only looking for it, but they're also bringing it into the conversations, which is very core to our work at Common Sense. We definitely want to make sure that we're watching together. It's a shared experience, and that more importantly, you're leveraging this media as a jumping off point to conversations, whether that conversation is about, again, feeling represented or not feeling represented, or how other groups might feel, and how things compare. And there's nothing like kids talking about the media they're consuming to get them very chatty. And I speak from experience, I can't get my kids to stop talking about media. So it's a great way to kind of, again, jump off on what can be a very heavy conversation.
Thanks so much for that, Jill. And, as I was starting to talk about with kids' sense of self, I think that's exactly right? Their kids are very curious about who they're becoming, and they're connecting to the media. So all the question asking that kids do and the retelling of those sorts of stories are excellent entry points for parents, for educators to really engage with young people around various topics about themselves as well as the world. And we know from developmental work and developmental psychology that sense of self that kids are forming during these years is critical. It becomes the foundation on which they build relationships with other people, the sort of futures they imagine for themselves. It impacts their academic engagement and pursuit of different careers, certainly their overall well-being. And so identity and the self are not sort of these frivolous constructs, but they're really at the core and the hub of who young people become. And so thinking critically and carefully about what kind of messaging kids get from their media, and the fact that the data are showing us that kids and families want this sort of media representation and diverse storytelling. I think it really raises important questions and a sense of urgency. And so, Adam, can you talk to us a little bit about what research is still needed in this space?
I think a lot more work is needed from the kids' perspective. At the end of the day, this is the content that's being made for them. So I feel as though understanding definitions of diversity, inclusion, and representation from a kid's perspective is so important. We've been talking to kids in the last few weeks about what they see, and some of the things that they've spotted is interesting. They as you know, they define things differently to adults. So they see diversity as not just visible disabilities or colour of skin or accents or height or weight. They see other things that we don't necessarily as adults acknowledge. They also revere certain things that adults probably have outgrown. So they revere expertise and experience of older people, and they may not see that in their content because they're defined as old and, boomers or whatever. So they kind of put down. I think from work we've done at Dubbit, there's issues beyond the obvious, which is things like stereotyping, German accents used for scientists, Russian accents used for bad guys, objectification, using eyelashes, lipstick, high heels to represent beauty, use of voice, a posh accent for intelligence, whereas a non-posh accent for someone being a bit thick. Symbolism such as, lower quality housing representing poverty, success being people being in big houses or opulence. I think there's I could go on about that. I think the issue the industry's really got to understand, though, is animation, because animation is so big in kids' lives. How are you going to show representation for younger kids, especially on a show built around puppies? I think you've got issues there. And I think the other thing that I really want to understand, and I think a lot of research is needed, is parents. Parents are the gatekeepers to content right up to, 11, 12 years old, and for some beyond. And our data shows, although the vast majority of parents want their children to watch shows that showcase culture, diversity, inclusion, but the problem is when it comes to the crux, when you say to parents, what about difficult issues or complex subjects? Parents don't want media to cover that. They want to do that themselves. And I think we need to understand what it is, what parents' reservations are about media covering things like Black Lives Matters, issues of COVID, issues that we're seeing in Canada and other countries around the world. And I think we need to understand a lot of work. So I think there's a lot more work to be done.
Thank you for that, Adam, and really great points. I really appreciate the way you highlighted an important part of this conversation, which is the difference between just representing diversity and doing it authentically and in ways that don't sort of reinforce sets of stereotypes, right? That's really authentic representation that kids and families are looking for, as well as the tension. And so I'm going to turn to you, Jill, and thinking about parents as well, but that tension of sort of where the research is and where it needs to go. So can you tell us a little bit about your current take on the state of diversity research in the industry? What's going well? Where are companies struggling? And how can we help?
It's interesting what you mentioned, Adam, because it seems that the tension of heavy topics and the concern around that, heavy topics are already in media that is unscripted. So kids are learning about rather meaty subjects, like something like Black Lives Matter, from an influencer on a YouTube video that they're watching. So it's dissipated way far beyond what is programmed on their kids' television sets, and is certainly much more accessible to kids. And so back to the industry itself, it behooves them to kind of move in the direction of addressing topics in small ways. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed, but addressing them because they're very present in the lives of kids and families overall. We've certainly seen a move towards getting more heavier content, more diversity into kids programming. Of course, with the ages of like 2 to 10, it's done more from a social emotional learning perspective. And then from over 10, and of course in the teen space rather, it can be much more direct and potentially heavy-handed. Hence the aging down of media and the fact that, again, these kids are exposed to a much wider variety of content online. But it seems that the desire is there for the audience, and it's not necessarily coming as quickly through the industry. And so I think it's just a matter of the industry catching up. The beauty of that is that we have this global audience now, right? Because of streaming, everything's being distributed in a much more global platform. It creates an opportunity for stories in a much more, to be told in a much more niche way, instead of hitting over and over again on the stereotypes that Adam already touched on, which were so perfect. I mean, you're right. You could go on and on about that list because they're so prevalent and prominent, especially in kids media. But now with so many creatives, so much content being developed across the globe, and access to that content, both online again and through streaming, it's a great opportunity for us to see more stories told. I think while the stories are being developed, the other part of that is how they're served up. So there is a ton of great content out there. I always say kids seem to be winning in this space right now because there's just so much. I mean, we're all having conversations around, have you seen this? Where is it streaming? Where do I find it? So a little bit more is about discovery. And I think that's an element of this conversation, the technology part of how algorithms are in charge of serving up content to our kids, how we help kids manage what is being served up to them, and really get away from only seeing one type of content, and hoping that the tech industry really makes more efforts as well to serve up more diversity in the content recommendation engines that they've built, instead of only reserving the kind of content that kids might be gravitating towards, to really get at all that great stuff that's out there.
Really excellent points. Thank you so much, Jill and Adam, for those insights. Really, this idea that we need to focus on young people and think about where they're going to get media, and making sure that we're attending to the sort of media they themselves are generating and consuming, and how we can sort of join that and think more intentionally, as well as thinking about this like global access. And, you know, as you were just saying, Jill, that the importance of thinking about how kids can get access to media that does exist, right? That sort of notion of mainstream and where power is sort of situated in the media space is certainly a complex question, and I think a big one for thinking about next directions. So I just want to thank you both for sharing your insights and really fantastic and important research. It's cutting edge, it's necessary, and really responsive, right, to the needs of parents and young people and what folks need and want right now. So I just want to wrap up. We're running out of time. It's been a fantastic and brief conversation here. And I just want to conclude with us remembering that, you know, kids are learning. We know they're using media, and they're definitely learning from it. They're not just learning, you know, specific content or ideas, but they're learning about themselves. They're learning about the world. They're learning about these things around diversity and inclusion that really matter. And so content creators can work intentionally to create media that not only replicates the world as it is and sort of reinforces some of the inequities and sort of overdone scripts, as both Jill and Adam were referencing, but really reimagines and recreates the world as perhaps it ought to be, right? A world that's more just and equitable, kind and creative and curious and certainly inclusive. So thank you, everyone, for your time. We hope that this conversation is generative in your work as well.